Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she rushed between tables at Romano's restaurant. The clock on the wall showed 9:30 p.m., and she still had 3 hours left on her shift. Her feet hurt badly in the old black shoes she wore every day, but she could not afford new ones right now. She had been working double shifts for 3 months straight, and her body was getting tired, but she had no choice. The restaurant was busy tonight with rich people eating expensive food and drinking wine that cost more than the Sarah made in a week. She smiled at every customer and tried to be polite even when they were rude to her. The tips were good here, and she needed every dollar she could get. Her younger brother Danny was sick, and the medicine he needed was very expensive. Their parents had died in a car accident 2 years ago, and now Sarah was the only one taking care of Danny. Sarah was 24 years old and was trying to finish school to become a music therapist. She went to classes during the day and worked at Romano's at night. Sometimes she was so tired that she could barely keep her eyes open, but she never complained. Danny was only 16 and he needed her. The doctor said he would get better, but the treatment would take time and lots of money. The restaurant was fancy with white tablecloths and gold decorations on the walls. In the middle of the dining room sat a beautiful black grand piano. Sarah looked at it every time she walked by. Nobody ever played it, and it just sat there like a piece of furniture. Sometimes late at night when the restaurant was empty, Sarah would run her fingers over the keys very quietly. The piano was perfectly tuned and had the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Sarah had been playing piano since she was 5 years old. Her mother had saved money for lessons, and Sarah had learned fast. She won many competitions in high school, and her teacher said she was very talented. Sarah had even been accepted to Juilliard, which was one of the best music schools in the world. But when her parents died, she had to give up that dream and take care of Danny instead. Now she only played piano at the community center once a week when she had time. There was an old piano there that was missing some keys and was out of tune, but it was better than nothing. Sarah still remembered all the pieces she had learned, and sometimes she would play them in her head. While she worked at the restaurant, tonight was especially busy because it was Friday and many important people came to Romano's on Friday nights. Sarah carried heavy trays of food and tried not to drop anything. Her boss-in-law, Romano, was a nice man, but he got very angry when waiters made mistakes in front of his rich customers. At 10 p.m., a group of men in expensive suits walked into the restaurant. Sarah recognized one of them immediately. It was Marcus Blackwood, the famous billionaire who owned many technology companies. He was on TV sometimes, and his picture was in magazines. He was known for being very smart and very rich, but also for being difficult to work with. Some people said he was mean and liked to show off his money. Marcus Blackwood was about 50 years old with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in 6 months. The men with him looked like business partners or lawyers. They all looked serious and important. Mr. Romano came out personally to seat them at the best table in the restaurant. Sarah watched nervously as Mr. Romano showed them to the corner table near the window. She had served Marcus Blackwood twice before, and both times had been unpleasant. He was rude to waiters and expected everything to be perfect. Once he had sent back his food 3 times because it was not hot enough. Another time he had complained that his water glass had spots on it. The hostess came up to Sarah and whispered that she would be serving Marcus Blackwood's table tonight. Sarah felt her stomach get tight with worry. She needed this job and could not afford to make any mistakes. She took a deep breath and walked over to their table with menus and water glasses. "Good evening, gentlemen," Sarah said, with her best smile. "Welcome to Romano's. Can I start you with something to drink tonight?" Marcus Blackwood looked up at her with those cold blue eyes, and she felt small and unimportant. He did not smile back at her. Instead, he looked annoyed, as if serving him was bothering her somehow. "We'll have your most expensive bottle of wine," he said in a voice that was used to giving orders. "And make sure the glasses are actually clean this time." Sarah nodded and wrote down the order. As she turned to leave, she accidentally glanced at the piano again. It was such a beautiful instrument, and she wished she could play it just once. Her fingers moved slightly as if they were playing invisible keys. Music was still the most important thing in her life, even though she barely had time for it anymore. Marcus Blackwood noticed her looking at the piano, and his eyes narrowed. He seemed to be studying her like she was some kind of puzzle he was trying to solve. Sarah hurried to the bar to get their wine. The bottle cost $400, which was more than she made in a whole week of working. She was very careful carrying it back to their table. Her hands were shaking slightly because she was nervous about serving such important customers. As she poured the wine, Marcus Blackwood watched her every move. The other men at the table were talking about business deals and making lots of money. Sarah tried not to listen, but she could not help hearing them talk about millions of dollars like it was nothing. "Are you ready to order dinner?" Sarah asked politely after she finished pouring the wine. The men ordered the most expensive items on the menu: lobster and steak and other fancy foods that Sarah had never tasted. As she wrote down their orders, she kept glancing at the piano, without meaning to. It seemed to be calling to her across the crowded restaurant. Marcus Blackwood was still watching her, and she could feel his eyes on her every time she looked at the piano. She wondered what he was thinking, but she was too afraid to ask. Rich people like him lived in a completely different world from people like her and Danny. Sarah brought the appetizers to Marcus Blackwood's table and tried to place them down quietly. The men were still talking about business and money. She could hear them discussing deals worth millions of dollars while she worried about paying for Danny's medicine next week. The difference between their worlds felt huge and impossible to cross. As she set down the plates, Marcus Blackwood suddenly stopped talking and looked directly at her. His cold blue eyes made her feel uncomfortable and small. The other men at the table continued their conversation, but Marcus was focused only on Sarah now. "You keep looking at that piano?" Marcus said loudly enough that people at nearby tables could hear him. "Do you play, or are you just staring at it like some kind of decoration?" Sarah felt her face get hot and red. Everyone around them had stopped eating and was now looking at her. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her and waiting for her answer. Her hands started to shake, and she almost dropped the empty tray she was holding. I do play a little, sir," Sarah said quietly, hoping he would just drop the subject and let her go back to work. Marcus Blackwood's eyes lit up with interest and something that looked like mischief. He seemed to enjoy making her uncomfortable in front of all these people. Sarah wished she could disappear or that the floor would open up and swallow her. "A little," Marcus repeated with a smile that was not friendly. "How interesting." He stood up from his chair suddenly, and Sarah took a step back. Marcus was tall, and when he stood up, he seemed to tower over her. The restaurant had gotten very quiet, and even the kitchen staff had stopped making noise. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his expensive leather wallet. Sarah could see it was full of money and credit cards. He took out a $100 bill and placed it on the white tablecloth next to his wineglass. The crisp bill looked very green against the white cloth. "Here is what we are going to do," Marcus said in a voice loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "I am going to make you a little challenge." Sarah's heart started beating faster. She did not like the way he was looking at her or the tone of his voice. The other customers in the restaurant had all stopped eating and were watching like they were at some kind of show. "You say you play piano a little," Marcus continued, "so here is my offer. You go over to that piano right now and play something for everyone here. If you can actually play and not just make noise, then this $100 tip is yours." Sarah looked at the money on the table. $100 would buy Danny's medicine for almost 2 weeks. It was more money than she usually made in tips in a whole night. But something about Marcus's smile made her feel like there was more to this challenge than he was telling her. "But," Marcus said, and his smile got wider, "if you embarrass yourself and play badly or cannot play at all, then you pay for our entire dinner tonight out of your own pocket." Sarah felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. She looked at all the expensive food they had ordered and quickly added up the cost in her head. The lobster and steak and wine would cost almost $400. That was more money than she had in her bank account. That was money she needed for rent and Danny's medicine and groceries. "I cannot do that, sir," Sarah said quietly. I need this job and I cannot afford to pay for your dinner. Then you should not have lied about being able to play piano, Marcus said with that same cold smile, unless of course you really can play. And you were just scared. The men at his table were laughing now, and Sarah could hear other customers whispering to each other. She felt humiliated and trapped. Marcus Blackwood was using his money and power to force her into an impossible situation. Just for his entertainment. Mr. Romano had heard the commotion and came over to see what was happening. When he saw Marcus Blackwood standing up and all the customers watching, he looked nervous. Marcus was an important customer who spent lots of money at the restaurant. Mr. Romano would not want to upset him. "Is everything all right here, Mr. Romano?" asked, trying to sound calm. "Everything is perfect," Marcus said. "I am just offering your waitress here a simple challenge. She claims she can play piano, so I want her to prove it." Mr. Romano looked at Sarah with worried eyes. She could see he wanted to help her, but he was afraid of losing an important customer. The restaurant needed people like Marcus Blackwood, too. Stay in business? Sarah looked around the restaurant at all the people staring at her. She could see some of them look sorry for her, while others seemed excited to watch what would happen. She felt like an animal trapped in a cage with nowhere to run. The piano sat in the middle of the restaurant, looking beautiful and elegant. Sarah had dreamed of playing it so many times, but not like this. Not as part of some cruel game where a rich man could humiliate her in front of everyone. "I do not think this is fair, sir," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am just trying to do my job. Life is not fair." Marcus said coldly, "That is the first lesson you need to learn. The second lesson is that when someone offers you an opportunity, you should take it or stop complaining about your situation." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. How dare this rich man talk to her about life being unfair when he had everything handed to him? He had never worked double shifts to pay for medicine. He had never had to choose between school and taking care of a sick brother. "What is it going to be, waitress?" Marcus said. "Are you going to take the challenge or admit that you were lying about being able to play?" Sarah looked at the $100 bill on the table again. Then she looked at the piano. Her fingers were trembling, but not from fear anymore. She was angry and tired of being treated like she was nothing by people who thought money made them better than everyone else. The whole restaurant was completely silent now, waiting for her answer. Even the servers had stopped working and were watching from the kitchen door. Sarah took a deep breath and made her decision. Sarah looked at Marcus Blackwood with his cold smile and expensive suit. She looked at the $100 bill on the table that could help pay for Danny's medicine. She looked at all the people in the restaurant watching her like she was some kind of entertainment. Then she looked at the beautiful black piano sitting in the middle of the room. "I accept your challenge," Sarah said quietly, but everyone in the restaurant heard her. Marcus's smile got bigger and meaner. He thought he had trapped a poor waitress who would embarrass herself in front of everyone. The men at his table were laughing and making bets about how badly she would play. Some of them were already getting their phones ready to record video of her failure. Sarah untied her black apron and folded it carefully. Her hands were steady now, even though her heart was beating fast. She walked slowly toward the piano and could feel every person in the restaurant watching her. The clicking of her old shoes on the marble floor was the only sound anyone could hear. When Sarah reached the piano, she stopped and looked at it closely. It was even more beautiful up close than it was from far away. The black wood was polished so well that she could see her reflection in it. The keys were white and perfect without a single scratch or mark. This piano was worth more money than Sarah would make in 5 years of working at the restaurant. Sarah sat down on the leather bench and adjusted the height, the way her old piano teacher had taught her. She could feel Marcus Blackwood and his friends watching her from their table. She could feel Mr. Romano watching nervously from near the kitchen. She could feel every customer in the restaurant holding their breath and waiting to see what would happen. Sarah placed her fingers gently on the keys and tested them very softly. The sound was perfect and rich and filled the quiet restaurant. This piano was tuned better than any piano she had ever played. It felt like the keys were waiting for her to bring them to life. She closed her eyes for a moment and thought about Danny lying in his hospital bed. She thought about all the nights she had worked late to pay for his medicine. She thought about the dreams she had given up to take care of her little brother. She thought about her parents who had loved music and had saved every dollar they could for her piano lessons. When Sarah opened her eyes, she was not thinking about Marcus Blackwood anymore. She was not thinking about the money or the challenge or the people watching her. She was only thinking about the music that was waiting. Inside the piano, Sarah began to play Chopin's Minute Waltz. Her fingers moved across the keys like they remembered exactly where to go. The music filled the restaurant with beautiful sounds that made everyone stop breathing. Even the servers who were carrying food stopped walking and stood still to listen. The music was perfect. Every note was clear and strong and exactly where it should be. Sarah's years of training showed in the way her hands moved, and the way she made the piano sing. This was not the playing of someone who knew a little piano. This was the playing of someone who had spent thousands of hours practicing and studying music. Marcus Blackwood's smile disappeared from his face. His mouth fell open a little bit as he realized that Sarah was not just good at piano. She was amazing at piano. The men at his table stopped laughing and started listening with surprise and respect, but Sarah was just getting started. Without stopping, she moved from the Chopin piece into something much harder. She began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, which was one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. Her hands moved so fast they were almost a blur, but every note was perfect and beautiful. The restaurant was completely silent except for the music. People had stopped eating with their forks halfway to their mouths. Servers had stopped working and were standing by the walls listening. Even the cooks had come out of the kitchen to hear what was happening. Sarah's fingers danced across the keys like she was telling a story without words. The music was sometimes soft and gentle like a whisper and sometimes loud and powerful like thunder. She made the piano sound like a whole orchestra playing together. The difficult parts that would make most pianists struggle seemed easy when Sarah played them. Marcus Blackwood stood up slowly from his table and walked closer to the piano. His face had changed completely. The mean smile was gone, and now he looked shocked and amazed. He had thought he was going to humiliate a poor waitress, but instead he was watching one of the most incredible piano performances he had ever seen. Other customers in the restaurant had gotten up from their tables too and were moving closer to listen. Some of them had tears in their eyes because the music was so beautiful. The piece Sarah was playing told a story of sadness and hope and love that everyone could feel even if they did not understand music. As Sarah played, she forgot about everything else in the world. She forgot about being tired from working double shifts. She forgot about worrying about money and Danny's medicine. She forgot about feeling small and unimportant when rich people looked down on her. All she felt was the music flowing through her fingers and filling the room with beauty. The Rachmaninoff piece was long and very challenging, but Sarah played every note perfectly. Her hands never missed a key and her timing was exact. This was not just someone who had learned to play piano. This was someone who had been born to make music. When Sarah reached the most difficult part of the piece where the hands had to move in opposite directions while playing different melodies at the same time, she did not slow down or make mistakes. She played it like it was easy, even though most professional pianists would struggle with this section. Marcus Blackwood was standing right next to the piano, now watching Sarah's hands move across the keys. He could not believe what he was seeing and hearing. This waitress who he had thought was lying about being able to play piano was giving a performance that belonged in Carnegie Hall or Lincoln Center. The music got louder and more powerful as Sarah reached the climax of the piece. The piano seemed to be singing with joy and triumph. Everyone in the restaurant could feel the emotion in the music, and many people were crying because it was so moving and beautiful. Sarah finished the Rachmaninoff piece with a powerful ending that made the whole piano vibrate with sound. For a moment, the restaurant was completely silent and nobody moved. Then slowly people began to understand what they had just heard. This was not just good piano playing. This was extraordinary piano playing that most people would never hear in their entire lives. But Sarah was not done yet. Instead of stopping and taking a bow like most pianists would do, she kept her hands on the keys. She looked out at all the people watching her and saw tears in their eyes. She saw Marcus Blackwood standing next to the piano with his mouth still open in shock. She saw Mr. Romano looking proud and amazed at the same time. Then Sarah began to play something different. This time it was not a famous piece by a classical composer. This was something she had written herself during the long nights when Danny was in the hospital and she did not know if he would get better. The melody was sad and beautiful and full of hope at the same time. The music told the story of a young woman who had lost everything but kept fighting. It told about working late nights and missing sleep and worrying about money. It told about loving someone so much that you would give up your dreams to take care of them. It told about finding hope in the darkest times and never giving up even when everything seemed impossible. As Sarah played her own composition, the whole restaurant seemed to change. The fancy decorations and expensive food did not matter anymore. The difference between rich and poor did not matter anymore. All that mattered was the music and the story it was telling. Everyone in the room could feel Sarah's struggle and her love and her strength. Marcus Blackwood moved even closer to the piano. He was no longer the arrogant billionaire who liked to show off his money and make other people feel small. He was just a man listening to beautiful music and feeling emotions he had forgotten he could feel. Tears were running down his cheeks. And he did not even know it. The melody Sarah was playing was sometimes soft like a lullaby and sometimes strong like a battle cry. Her hands moved across the keys with perfect control and every note meant something. She was not just playing music. She was sharing her heart and soul with everyone in the room. Other customers had gotten up from their tables and were standing in a circle around the piano. Rich businessmen in expensive suits were crying. Elegant women in diamond jewelry were holding their hands over their hearts. Everyone was united by the power of Sarah's music. The servers and kitchen staff had all come out to listen. Mr. Romano was standing with tears streaming down his face because he had never heard anything so beautiful in his restaurant. Even the tough dishwashers who usually did not care about classical music were wiping their eyes and listening in amazement. Sarah's composition told the story of her brother Danny and how sick he had been. The music showed his pain and her fear that she might lose him. But then the melody changed and became full of hope and determination. It showed how love could give someone the strength to keep going even when everything was falling apart. As she played, Sarah remembered all the nights she had sat by Danny's hospital bed holding his hand while he slept. She remembered how scared she had been when the doctors said they were not sure if the treatment would work. She remembered making the decision to give up her place at Juilliard so she could work and pay for his medicine. The music grew stronger and more beautiful as Sarah played about finding hope in the darkness. She played about the small victories, like when Danny smiled for the first time after weeks of being sick. She played about the kindness of nurses who stayed late to help them. She played about the power of never giving up on someone you love. Marcus Blackwood was completely transformed by what he was hearing. He had built his fortune by being tough and ruthless in business. He had forgotten what it felt like to be moved by something beautiful. He had forgotten what it felt like to care about someone other than himself. But Sarah's music was reminding him of parts of himself he had lost long ago. The melody reached its highest point as Sarah played about Danny getting better and coming home from the hospital. The music was full of joy and gratitude and love that could not be contained. Everyone in the restaurant could feel the happiness and relief in every note she played. Then slowly the music became gentle. Again, as Sarah played about the present moment, she played about being grateful for every day they had together. She played about finding beauty in simple things like making breakfast for Danny or helping him with his homework. She played about how love could make even the hardest life feel worth living. As the composition came to an end, Sarah's playing became softer and softer until it was like a whisper. The final notes hung in the air like a prayer or a blessing. When she lifted her hands from the keys, the silence that followed was deep and full of meaning. For several seconds, nobody in the restaurant moved or made a sound. They were all still, feeling the emotions that Sarah's music had awakened in them. Some people were crying openly and did not care who saw them. Others were standing with their eyes closed, trying to hold on to the beautiful feelings the music had given them. Then slowly one person began to clap. It was an elderly woman at a corner table who had been eating alone. Her applause was soft and respectful, like she was in church. Then another person joined in, and then another, until the whole restaurant was clapping, and many people were shouting things like bravo and beautiful. The applause grew louder and stronger until it filled the entire restaurant. People were standing up and cheering for Sarah like she had just given a concert at Carnegie Hall. Some customers were wiping tears from their eyes while they clapped. Others were shaking their heads in amazement at what they had just experienced. Marcus Blackwood was not clapping yet. He was still standing next to the piano, staring at Sarah like he was seeing her for the first time. His whole understanding of who she was had been completely changed by her music. She was not just a waitress working to pay bills. She was an artist with extraordinary talent and a heart full of love and courage. Sarah stood up slowly from the piano bench as the applause continued all around her. She felt dizzy and overwhelmed by what had just happened. For a few minutes she had forgotten where she was and had lost herself completely in the music. Now, she was back in Romano's restaurant, wearing her waitress uniform and facing a room full of strangers who were cheering for her. The applause went on for several more minutes. People were not just clapping politely like they would for background music. They were giving her a standing ovation like she was a famous concert pianist. Some customers were shouting bravo and others were whistling. The sound filled the entire restaurant and probably could be heard out on the street. Marcus Blackwood walked slowly towards Sarah. His face looked completely different than it had before. The mean smile and cold eyes were gone. Instead, he looked humble and sorry and amazed all at the same time. When he reached her, he stopped and looked into her eyes for a long moment before he spoke. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said quietly, but his voice carried across the restaurant, even over the applause. That was not just good piano playing, that was extraordinary. That was beautiful beyond anything I have heard in years. Sarah did not know what to say. She had expected him to be angry that she had proven him wrong. She had expected him to find some way to avoid paying the $100 or to claim that she did somehow. She had not expected him to apologize or to look at her with respect. "Where did you study music?" Marcus asked. "That level of skill does not come from taking a few lessons at the local music store." Sarah took a deep breath and decided to tell him the truth. She had nothing left to lose now, and she was tired of pretending to be less than she was. "I was accepted to Juilliard when I graduated from high school. I won several state piano competitions, and my teacher said I had what it took to be a professional pianist." Marcus nodded like this made sense to him. "What happened? Why are you working as a waitress instead of performing in concert halls?" Sarah looked around the restaurant at all the people still clapping and listening to their conversation. She saw Mr. Romano watching with pride and concern. She saw the other servers looking at her like they had never seen her before. She saw customers wiping tears from their eyes and shaking their heads in amazement. "My parents died in a car accident 2 years ago," Sarah said simply. "My younger brother Danny was only 14 and he got very sick. Someone had to take care of him and pay for his medical treatment. So I gave up my place at Juilliard and got a job to support us both." The restaurant had gotten quiet again as people strained to hear what Sarah was saying. Her story was spreading from table to table as people whispered to each other about the waitress who had just given them the performance of a lifetime. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his business card. But this time he did not throw it at her or hand it to her like she was beneath him. Instead, he offered it to her respectfully, like he was meeting an important person. "I run several companies," Marcus said, "but I also have a foundation that supports musicians and arts education programs. We have been looking for someone with your talent and your character to lead our new music therapy program for children's hospitals." Sarah took the business card with shaking hands. She looked at it and saw Marcus Blackwood's name printed in gold letters along with the names of his companies and foundation. The position pays $120,000 per year with full medical benefits. Marcus continued, "We will also pay for any additional education or certifications you need. And we will cover all of your brother's medical expenses. For as long as he needs treatment." Sarah felt like she was dreaming. $120,000 was more money than she had ever imagined making. It was enough to give Danny the best medical care available. It was enough for them to live comfortably and for her to go back to school if she wanted to. "How do you know about Danny's medical expenses?" Sarah asked suspiciously. "I never told you the details about his condition." Marcus looked a little embarrassed. "I make it my business to know things about people," he said. "But more importantly, your music just told me everything I need to know about your character. Someone who can create that much beauty while going through such hardship is exactly the kind of person we need leading our music therapy program." Sarah looked around the restaurant again. The customers were still watching and listening. Many of them were nodding and smiling at her like they approved of what Marcus was offering. She saw hope and encouragement in their faces. "Children in hospitals need hope," Marcus continued. "They need someone who understands what it feels like to be scared and sick and worried. They need someone who can use music to help them heal, not just physically, but emotionally too. Your music tonight showed me that you have the gift to do that." Sarah thought about Danny and all the nights she had sat with him in the hospital. She thought about how much it would have meant to have someone come play beautiful music during those dark, scary times. She thought about other families going through what they had gone through and how music might help them find hope and strength. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked. "A few minutes ago you were trying to humiliate me in front of everyone. Now you are offering me a dream job." "I do not understand." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked down at his expensive shoes and then back up at Sarah. "Because your music reminded me of something I had forgotten," he said. "It reminded me what? It feels like to be human. I have spent so many years focused on making money and winning business deals that I forgot there were more important things in life." He paused and looked around the restaurant at all the people still watching them. "I became the kind of person who would try to humiliate a waitress for my own entertainment. That is not who I want to be anymore." Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of joy and relief and hope. For the first time in 2 years, she could see a future that did not involve working double shifts and worrying about money every single day. "I accept," Sarah said simply, and the whole restaurant erupted in applause again. Marcus smiled, and this time it was a real smile full of warmth and kindness. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the $100 bill he had put on the table earlier. But instead of handing it to Sarah, he walked over and put it in the tip jar that sat near the piano. "That was just the beginning," he said. "Tomorrow we start changing lives together."